The one thing that resets the baseline for the trauma is when you open your heart. The hormones of stress, the chemicals of stress, are arousing your brain to live in survival and say, what if I lose everything that I have? The stress is when your body and brain are out of balance or homeostasis. The person must look at that emotion and they must learn how to transform that emotion into wisdom. The only way you're going to become conscious of your unconscious self is we create based on lack, right? Many people see something that they want and they realize that they don't have it, and the natural thing is to create what you don't have. So it's natural to create based on lack, and then we have to get up and work really hard to accomplish and then produce an outcome. When we produce the outcome, the experience then takes away the lack, because the emotion from the experience fulfills that lack. And then it's only transient, and then that lack kind of comes back again, and it causes us to speculate, what if I don't succeed? And it's common, but what we discovered with people that do this, when we look at their brains in real time, is that when we analyze our life like that and we ruminate, we tend to make our brain worse. In other words, by doing that and overthinking and overanalyzing, you're narrowing your focus on something. And you're doing that because the hormones of stress, right? The chemicals of stress are arousing your brain to live in survival and say, what if I lose everything that I have? When you're thinking within that emotion, you're actually causing your brain to experience more of those emotions, and you get caught in this loop, right? So the point is that none of that is good for you. In fact, you're actually turning on the stress response just by thought alone. And those chemicals of stress become addictive, right? And so not knowing this, many people don't know this, but they're doing this just for some rush of adrenaline. And you can do that for hours, because when you're in stress and you're in survival, you actually have to narrow your focus on the cause. And people become over-focused, and they overanalyze themselves and they overanalyze their lives, and they make their brain worse. Even when they have everything that they want, the big fear is, what if I lose it, right? Yeah. So the fear then is the issue, right? So then you got to face off with that fear, and you got to make sure that that fear cannot influence your life in any way. And that's the thing, the emotion that you have to change. To become conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you think when you're feeling fear, it's so important to become so conscious that you don't go unconscious to those thoughts again. In other words, just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? And if the anxiety and the worry and the fear is something that you experience on a daily basis, then in meditation, you have to become so conscious that you don't go unconscious and let that fear run you. The person must look at that emotion and they must learn how to transform that emotion into wisdom, because the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. When you say to like a Navy SEAL or a military special ops person, if you can open your heart, it'll reset the baseline for the trauma. Liberated. And the side effect of them overcoming that emotion that many are addicted to is joy. It's the body liberated from being tormented by the same emotion that's keeping the person in the past. And some people just have to reach their lowest denominator. That point where they're at their lowest level, where they just can't go on any longer, and they make up their mind to change. Because when they're feeling that low or no longer like themselves, they can actually observe themselves for the first time. They can see how they've been thinking. You know, they can objectify their objective self. And it takes energy and it takes awareness to disentangle from those programs. The beauty behind the research that we've been doing is that we now know that it's entirely possible. I mean, we've got people that have had horrible pasts, brutal pasts, traumatic pasts, abuse of all kinds, traumas, And some have done really horrible things and witnessed some really horrible things. 30 hours a week of panic attacks, trying every drug, every pharmaceutical, every therapy, exercising, cold plunges, saunas, diets. Nothing was making their trauma go away until they finally sat down and said, I got to look at myself. And when people really are willing to see what's beyond this emotion, what's beyond this belief, what's beyond this behavior, I'm going to sit and I'm going to work on overcoming myself. It is the overcoming process that we discovered that is the becoming process. And when people reach the middle of their life, 35, 40 years old, 95% of who they are by that age is a set of memorized subconscious programs. So the only way you're going to become conscious of your unconscious self is to catch yourself going unconscious. And every time you catch yourself going unconscious and you become conscious, that you get more conscious and get better at catching yourself from going unconscious. The brain changes the most when you reach that point where you don't want to go any further and you just don't think you can. And when you go a little further, that's when the brain changes the most, because you're leaving the familiar territory, you're leaving the known, and you're stepping into the unknown. So I don't want to support the idea that people who have lost their ambition to feel will never feel again. They'll just have to reach a point where they'll have to finally realize, is this serving me? And if it's not, I have to look for solutions. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. It is the repository of the autobiographical self. You have a certain family, you've studied certain things, you know certain people, you lived in certain places, you own certain things at certain times. And when you meet people, you tell them who you are based on your experience in life. So then you have a neurological network for your mother, a neurological network for your father, a neurological network for your siblings, for your cell phone, for your home, because you've experienced all these elements in your life, right? And because you've experienced all those elements in your life, you have an emotion that's associated with every one of those people or objects or things or places, right? And so when a person is out of balance or they're stressed, the stress is when your body and brain are out of balance or homeostasis, and the alarm system or the emergency system switches on and your brain goes into a heightened kind of aroused state. Stress is created by not being able to predict something, not being able to control something, or having the perception in your life that something's going to get worse. And when that kind of alarm system switches on, it's a survival system. And what you try to do then is you try to control and predict everything in your life. So the arousal causes you to shift your attention from one person, to another meeting, to another thing, to another place, to another time. And because you have a neurological network assigned to all of those elements, like a lightning storm in the clouds, your brain begins to compartmentalize, it begins to silo, and it begins to fire out of order. If you were to measure the brain when it does that, it's very incoherent. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And the side effect of that is that we begin to become fragmented. We can't control our mind. And we kind of get very narrow focused. And we begin to overthink and overanalyze. And it's exactly what drives the brain further and further out of balance. If you broaden your focus and you begin to focus on space, on nothing, the act of sensing space and no longer thinking, and sensing and feeling space causes those different compartments that were firing incoherently out of order, they begin to synchronize. Those modules begin to form and connect with one another, and larger real estates, a part of the brain begins to fire more coherently. Brain begins to synchronize. And what syncs in the brain links in the brain. That when you do this properly, the brain begins to function more coherently and more organized. And when that happens, the brain gets highly creative. You're processing a different level of consciousness, a more holistic level of consciousness. So that's called intention. The person all of a sudden can begin to imagine a future because they've moved from that survival state into a more creative state. At the same time, we see this kind of cooperation with the heart. Like the heart all of a sudden begins to bloom. It starts to become very coherent as well. Because when we're living in stress and we're living in survival, and a person's distracted and they have kids and obligations and meetings and they're fragmented like that, the arousal of those stress hormones, the person's not running, exerting themselves, running. They're not fighting, and they're not, fleeing and hiding. This adrenaline, it's causing the person to step on the gas and step on the brake at the same time. And the heart is beating against the closed system, right? So the heart starts to beat out of order. And when it becomes incoherent waves cancel each other out, and energy leaves the heart, and you stop trusting, you stop connecting, you stop communicating, you stop being creative. The heart is the creative center. So when the brain gets highly organized and synchronized, you see this kind of energy move right into the heart. And the heart is the creative center. At the same time, it resets the baseline for the trauma. The heart begins to beat like a great drum, very coherently, very orderly, and it tells the brain to get creative.